So I have here today Nancy Wang, the Executive Director of Voters Not Politicians, and Nancy's going to give us kind of a quick run through of where we've been on redistricting, where we're currently at on redistricting, and what the next few months look like in regards to redistricting. So Nancy, thanks for taking the time to chat with us and helping to educate Corey Johnson Levitt's clients. So kind of first question is, can you tell us about the process to where we got here today and what the commission has done thus far?
So we have a 13-member commission, as you know, all citizen commissioners, not political animals. They've really learned a lot. They've been working since September of 2020, so for over a year now. And what they have to do is they have to draw Michigan's next set of legislative maps, state house, state senate, and then also congressional maps that will be used starting in the 2022 elections. And they have a lot of discretion. They can, they took a lot of public input. They had to figure out how to incorporate that input into maps, but their maps have to, be tested, and they have to meet all of these criteria that are specifically included in the constitutional amendment. And they're ranked by order. So these maps, no matter what happens, they have to make sure that they, comply with the Voting Rights Act, federal constitution. They have to be contiguous. You can't have, districts that are like, two parts that are unconnected. And then they also have to respect communities of interest. And then they have to be fair, meaning that they don't confer one advantage to one party or another. So of the stuff, the comments that you might have heard over the new maps, those two criteria are probably, have been some of the most, commented on, controversial, kind of people have strong feelings about, how do you draw a map where you keep a certain community together, namely Detroit or, Bangladeshi community, for example, but then also at the same time, so that you have Voting Rights Act districts, and then you also have, overall statewide partisan fairness. So they had to grapple with that. They had to do it out in the open. And they got a lot of, really passionate feedback, which is great. And so they've gotten through it, and they've drawn maps now, and they put them out for a final period, like you said, the 45 days of public comment. That just started about a week ago or so. And then the 45 days runs out. I think it's like the very last week of December. They've given themselves a deadline of December 30th to adopt the final maps. So what they did was they went through all of this, they drew maps, and they agreed, they all voted on sets of finalists upon which they're, these are the ones that are up for public comment right now, and these are the ones that they're going to be voting on to determine who, which maps are the winners, which maps are going to be the final kind of operative maps for the state of Michigan. So they've identified 3 finalists for congressional, 3 for state house, and then 3 for state senate. And, they're all different, right? So there's different tests that you can run to see if they, how they score with respect to partisan bias. They're there for people to see, did they keep this community together or not? So that's why there's these 45 days, and people are jumping in and saying, this map is way better than that map. And then according to the Constitution, what happens is at the end of 45 days, again, the commission is planning to take a vote around December 30th or a couple days earlier. They have to kind of try to reach consensus. So the best case scenario is that the commission, 13 members, those 13 members are 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 5 non-affiliated with either Dems or Republicans. So that's like you can be third-party supporter, or you can be an independent. Ideal case, is that you're trying to get away from a system where you have one party in control of the whole, the whole process, or one party in cahoots with, another, maybe the independents that, to adopt maps that unfairly bias the other party. So the Constitution says an agreement means you have a majority of the commissioners, right? So 7 out of the 13, and that you have 2 votes of the Dem commissioners, 2 votes of the Republicans, and then 2 votes of the independent / third party non-affiliates. And then if you have those and then 7 overall, then that's great. And that's the commission's final map. for that kind of map, congressional, etc. If that doesn't happen, again, they've already gone through this whole process where they've drawn the maps together, they voted on the maps. Like, we haven't seen, despite a lot of the commentary and what you've seen in other states, like, we haven't seen them really break down along party lines,
right?
Or take like straight up partisan votes. So we're hoping that this final decision will be sort of like them continuing that.
And just a point of clarity, Nancy, in that final, they have to vote on one of the maps they put forward, or could they draw a new consensus map?
Oh, no. Yeah,
so
no.
Maps that people will see out there,
yeah,
will be what is adopted by the commission at some point.
Yes.
In this 45, these are what you consider final draft maps.
Correct.
Folks can see. Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll link to that in the email so folks can see all those.
Yeah. If they wanted, for whatever reason, to bring a new map into the mix at this point, that new map has to have had 45 days of public comment. Gotcha. So they can't just whip it, take it out of their pocket at the last minute. So let's say they can reach agreement on congressional, state senate, and maybe state house. There's a lot of strong feelings about each one. Maybe they can't reach an agreement on state house, let's say, as the commissioners. Then what happens is there is an alternative scenario where then they go to ranked choice voting. At this point, they can vote on both the collaborative map, so that 3 that they put into the final pool, but then also individual commissioners were allowed to put forward their own individual maps to be considered during the ranked choice voting stage. And I think for State House, Commissioner Zatella was the only one to put forward her own, option. So then during ranked choice voting, the commissioners would be voting on 4 maps. So the 3 that they all agreed on, and then Zatella's individual maps. And then the amendment specifies, then you have ranked choice. So then you have 4 maps, you give the highest one, the one you prefer the most, 4 points, give, 3, 2 points, 1 point, and then you see which map gets the most points. Not to dive too much into the weeds, but there is other consensus kind of components into that. Again, you really the amendment is trying to get to the maps that have broad support, not just one party support. So, in an ideal case, again, you'd have a ranked choice map that gets the highest votes and has support, from the other parties as well. So in any case, so there's that, and then there's other, variations of that, trying to get to a final vote, a final approval agreement.
Gotcha.
So let's say December 30th, they vote all 3 sets of maps, and they come up with the commission's final set: congressional, state senate, and state house.
Yep, one map each.
Yeah. Yep. At that point, like, Michigan is like that, is another huge milestone, right? Like, we're at a huge milestone right now. Like, the mapping process is over. Once they have final maps that they've approved, then that's approved, and then those become law in 60 days. Okay. Within those 60 days, you can be sure that there's going to be a lot of lawsuits filed saying that these maps don't, you didn't comply with the Voting Rights Act, for example, or that, you unfairly biased, this party or that you split up these communities, and it doesn't make sense how you did that. Regardless, whatever the grounds are, other states like California, Arizona have shown that independent commissions, they draw maps that are a million times better than their legislators drew, and yet they're sued no matter what. But the good news is for voters is that every map that's ever been approved by an independent commission has been upheld by the courts. So no map has ever been overturned, unlike legislatively drawn maps, right?
And then let's just just to that point, in that process that the litigation is done, so 60 days, so say it's December 31st, the end of February, early March, these maps are now effective. By a political viewer or voter standpoint, they will now be in a new district. just because there's litigation, that doesn't change. Members will be filing in these new districts just because there's litigation. None of that'll change. And then pending litigation, that could change, but early next year, that litigation will take a while to play out. It'll look and feel like the new maps are being enacted and going forward.
Yeah, so one tactic, of course, is for somebody to bring suit to try to stall, and try to prevent these commission-drawn maps from taking effect for the 2022 elections, because they want the current gerrymandered maps to be operative for one more cycle, and that's not going to happen. So the intent behind the constitutional amendment is being like enshrined in our Constitution, not just legislation, so it's like the biggest deal, right? What the courts have to pay attention to is that the voters wanted citizen drawn maps to be used starting in 2022.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up? I think that was pretty comprehensive and impressive from top of the head, Nancy. Well done.
Sure. Another thing is that they will have to issue a report that tells everybody why they made the decisions that they did, which of course is also the opposite of what we've seen, with the legislative process.
And is that's part of it? When you watch a meeting, they get asked by either the legal counsel or a staffer who says, can you tell me why you put these communities together, how you interpreted the Voting Rights Act, how you interpreted communities of interest, and all that information is gathered and then put into that final report.
Yeah. And then they have to put all the data, that they're using to support their arguments available as well. So it's all out there.
Yeah.
It's all out there. You can the idea is that a person, can replicate what the commission did, right? They can walk through all the steps and then they would arrive at the same maps.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
As a political nerd, the data side of this is always very intriguing. So, good.
So we've gotten a lot of national press lately, right? And then a lot of them, as you can imagine, are news media that's comparing what's happening in Michigan to Virginia or anywhere else, Yeah,
Ohio's got a pretty nasty redistricting process going on. So
it's pretty remarkable.
Good. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for educating us, and maybe we'll have you back in late December to talk about what comes of the maps and where we go from there.
Yeah, exciting. Thanks, Andy.
All right, cool.
Thank you for joining A Key to the Inside, the KJL podcast.